Arthur the War King, Founder of Britain and His People of the Dark Ages, by Alan Wilson and A.T. Blackett. Chapter 1, The Marriage. It was late afternoon on a windy autumn day, with high, wide clouds scudding across the skies, and fitful breaks of mild, bright sunshine dappled the hills with a moving pattern of light and shade. 3 young boys stood idly near the banks of the River Wye, just above its junction with the River Monnow, at the place known as Monmouth. All around them grazed horses, and here and there along the river were other herdsmen. The boys were dressed in simple shirt-like tunics of brightly coloured plaids woven diagonally. Each had a blanket-like cloak around his shoulders. They were dark-haired and carried staves, and were bare-legged and barefoot. The horse herds along the river meadows had been growing all day, as new parties of warriors arrived led by their chieftains. The shields, the spears, the armour and weapons of the helmeted warriors, occasionally sparkling and glinting dull in the weak autumn sunlight. The tree-covered hills cast shadows in all directions. Other groups of mounted men were riding in. Some up along the wide valley from the Tintern shouted greetings to each other, some singing, some talking noisily as they rode in. The princes and chieftains and their leading warriors rode magnificent huge horses, mostly chestnut brown, some roan, others gleaming black, and the most prized shining white, the Bonhenith. The freemen, followers, and clansmen of the chiefs rode less valuable mounts and sturdy mounting ponies. It was the year 502 AD, and the kings of southern Britain, South Wales, were gathering for a meeting. There was less excitement now than there had been amongst the watchers in the meadows when the first troops had come riding in during the morning. The horses were being unsaddled and watered at the river before being hobbled for the night. Each warrior carried small sacks of grain and other bags containing his own food, slung around the back and the front of his saddle. The armoured horsemen of South Wales could travel to Scotland in 1 week, needing only to stop for water on their way. The warriors, led by their chiefs, had strutted off proudly to the great encampment at the halls of Gugun Vawr Varius, the great son of King Cynfon and grandson of King Pebiai, the dribbler, leaving a few servants and boys to take care of the horses. Suddenly there was a larger noise, a distant rumbling of many, many hooves a-pounding the earth like a low, distant thunder. One of the boys near the stream climbed into the low branches of a leaning tree, and his companions scrambled to join him. As they peered westward, shading their eyes against the setting sun over the brow of the hill above Trelech and Troy, hundreds of bright spear points and helmets gleamed, silver blue and copper red, as a long column of horsemen made their way down the old track road which led from the top of the hill. Clouds of dust rose from the road, and the noise increased as the head of the column came closer, with more and more men still pouring over the ridge of the hill. The arrival of this large army created a commotion which spread through the meadows, affecting the grazing herds and their watchers. One of the 3 boys in the tree, a lad of about 10 years old, called out to a nearby herdsman watering some horses at the river's edge. "What chieftain is this?" The herdsman laughed quietly. "It's no chieftain. That is Theodoric, king of all southern Britain, and his son, King Maurice." The boys in the tree stared as the long column moved across the meadow closer and closer. Other minor kings had arrived during the day, their magnificent armour and horse trappings gleaming gold and silver, and bright blue and red enamel shining brightly. But there was a much larger regiment, and there were many princes and chiefs riding in the column. Agricola Longhand, Aircall Lowhere, the Prince of Dyfed in West, had sailed up to the River Severn and anchored his ships at the mouth of the Wye, and marched the 20 miles up the meeting place. King Iddon of the city of Caerwent on the plains of Gwent on the banks of the Severn had arrived first, travelling up the valley. Then had come King Cadwan, ruler of the lands beyond the Tawey in the west called Carmarthen, and with him came the great warrior princes, Tredysil and Reen from the far west. From the north had come Augustus, king of Brecon with his sons, and from Powys had come the mighty King Conan Aurelian, son of Cadeth. The fields along the river banks, as far as the eye could see, were filled with horses and scattered groups of men talking, chatting, sitting around small fires. The procession of King Theodoric had moved down the hill and across the level ground, and the king led his followers with a great splashing and much laughter into the shallow ford across the river. They churned through the water, and the King Theodoric and Maurice his son rode out to the river close to the tree where the three boys stood on the thick, low branch. They had never seen the High King before, and they stared with great interest at the thick-set, powerfully built man, aged about 55 years, who sat upright on a gleaming, huge black stallion. The king's face was weather-beaten. His dark, black, curly hair was laced with grey. He was clean-shaven, as were all the British, and he had piercing grey eyes, and a long, jagged, white, old scar wound ran from his right earlobe to the corner of his mouth. The king wore a great red cloak fastened across his chest with a solid gold clasp, covering the heavy leather jerkin, which was itself covered with gold-embossed armoured plates and scales. "Good day to you, Lord King," shouted one of the boys, and the other two quickly repeated the words. The king glanced at them. "Good day to you, three men in the tree," he called back with a laugh, answering the greeting as the custom of the land demanded. 3 was considered to be the ultimate magical lucky number of the Celtic race. To be greeted simultaneously by 3 people the moment he rode his horse across the river into the land of Gugan the Great, his cousin, was obviously a very lucky omen. The significance of the fact that the 3 were in a tree would be something that the wise men and soothsayers would work out. King Maurice, son of Theodoric, rode with his father, wearing a light blue cloak with red bands. He was aged about 26, leaner and not so heavily built as the older king, with long straight black hair and with the same piercing grey eyes. He wore the typical round domed helmet, covered in bright blue enamel and circled with rings of ornamental silver and gold, and surmounted by a short spike. His shield was slung over his shoulder, and in common with all the other warriors, he carried a thick 12-foot spear resting over his other shoulder. The young king's horse was a magnificent chestnut beast. "How has the fishing been in the River Wye this year?" he called to the 3 boys. "Good for salmon, poor for trout," shouted back the boy who had spoken first. The men laughed, and the procession moved on until at least 1,000 armoured horsemen had crossed the river nearest the tree. The hall of Gugan the Great was a large, long, stone-walled building with a thick, long timber roof, supported by a massive row of timber uprights running down the centre of the hall. 2 other sets of upright timber bulks, encased into the inner side of the walls of the hall, held up the wide roof. Other timber buildings, with low stone walls rising only for the first 3 feet of the sides, were grouped in a great square round a hall of the prince. One of the servants saw the procession of King Theodoric crossing the river, and ran to tell Elwyn, the gatekeeper and steward of the hall. About 1 minute later, Gugan the Great stepped out to the door at the south end of the hall, and walked out into his courtyard to wait and greet his cousin, as he had come out and greeted all the other members of the royal clan. Gugan was a short, stocky man, thick-set with an immense barrel chest, wide shoulders and a neck like a bull. He had round, chubby features and dark brown eyes. His dark hair was cut short, cropped close to his head. Gugan was followed by his 2 sons, Caradoc Brawny Arm, a huge, much taller version of his powerfully built father, and Morgan, a medium-sized lean man with a sharp, intelligent face, a contrast to his bull-like brother and father. The other kings and princes came out of the hall and stood with Gurgan, watching as the leading figures of the column of horsemen came up the slope to the hall. All of them had handed their weapons to Elwyn the steward when they entered the hall, as was the custom. "He has got that big black horse," said Iddwen, Prince of Carwent. "Beautiful animal. I've got a couple of foals by it," agreed Cadogan, the Lord of Carmarthen. "I would not want to control a damn thing," remarked King Augustus of Brecon. "Stallions of that age can be bastards." "You let up Brecon will have to learn to ride horses without falling off," said Gugan with a wry smile. "Horses are different from mountain ponies." "Hey, I can remember you going arse over tip the back of that little grey mare in the River of Wen years ago," retorted Augustus. "Chasing bloody Saxons, and he fell off his horse." There was an outburst of laughter, and Gugan beamed with a huge smile and threw his arms out wide. "Aye, man, it was the stupidest thing ever. Everyone chasing Saxons all over the fields, and me running in circles trying to catch a bloody horse that would not stand still. They came to raid us, and we were waiting for them in the woods." "It would not have been so bad if you had not been Chief General," said Agricola, Longhand, unable to restrain himself from laughing. "If anyone had taken any damn notice of you, the whole army would have dismounted and run in circles after their horses." The whole group dissolved into hoots of laughter. "It must have at least confused the Saxons anyway," concluded Gurgan. "We won easily." King Theodoric and Maurice, with about 20 of their nobles, had entered the compound, and they all walked forward to greet him. The High King swung himself down from his horse. "Theodoric, boy, good to see you. Welcome, welcome to you. We thought you'd be here earlier." The 2 men clasped hands in greeting. Maurice and the others of the king's retinue got down from their horses, and everybody shook hands with everyone else, with a great deal of backslapping and good humour. "Oh, I could hear you lot laughing at us getting our feet wet in that damn river," growled Theodoric in mock seriousness. "It's about time you built a bridge down there, Gurgan." "Oh, we were talking about the time Gurgan fell off that grey mare down in the Iweni River, and the damn thing bolted with the Saxons running all over the place." Cadogan stroked the neck of Theodoric's gleaming black horse. "My God, yes!" Theodoric roared with laughter. "I came off 3 times that day. My horse took an arrow in the rump and kept bucking like a maniac. Not this one. Oh, a beautiful roan it was." "I remember it well," Augustus said quietly. "Beautiful horse. Lovely animal." Led by King Theodoric and Gurgan, the whole group of minor kings and princes and lords of southern Britain went into the hall. Outside, across the fields and along the river, small fires were being lit, and small leather tents were erected by the soldiers. Smoke wafted lazily and erratically in the evening. Here and there a horse neighed, and distant voices carried indistinctly across the field. Servants from the prince's hall carried out huge lumps of meat from freshly butchered cattle and flagons of beer. Gurgan the Great entertained all his guests.